live. And what is the topic today, Joel? Come on, what is it?
Today the topic is Israel, Iran, and USA, and there have been some new confirmations that reinforces the MOR model. So that's
That what? What did you say?
reinforces that
Oh, that
strengthens.
reinforces. I see. Yes. Well, a lot of stuff is happening that reinforces the MOR model, right? I mean, it's almost an embarrassment of riches right now. What can't we point to that is a confirmation of MOR's model? I mean, what can't we explain? We explain everything, but you're right. These are important details that are diagnostic, that are manifesting right now. So we had discussed them briefly before we came on air. So one of them, if I remember correctly, is that there are different possible estimates that one could make about the damage that was sustained in the Iranian nuclear program after the recent Israeli attack, right? So depending on how you process what people say is the evidence, you might say, well, the Iranian nuclear program was delayed by, I don't know, 4 months, or you might say, no, it was delayed by 14 months, or it was delayed by 3 years. You know, there's a range of estimates going from very, very little delay to at least moderate delay, right? And so the question is here, well, if your hypothesis is that Donald Trump is an ally of Israel and is focused on protecting the security of the state of Israel, which is one of the hypotheses that we could consider, right? What would you predict that Donald Trump would do, right? From the point of view of that hypothesis. And then you can have a different hypothesis that says, well, no, I think that Donald Trump is an enemy of Israel and that he is promoting jihadism around the world. And on the basis of that hypothesis, what would you predict? Okay, concerning the estimate that he ought to prefer. In other words, how does an ally of Israel, in one hypothesis, go about choosing an estimate concerning the delay imposed on the Iranian nuclear program? And how does an enemy of Israel go about deciding how to choose an estimate about the delay imposed on the Iranian nuclear program? This is the question. This is how you consider a hypothesis in relation to the evidence, right? You need to say what each hypothesis predicts. So in the case of an ally of Israel, which is one of the hypotheses, you predict that he's going to choose whichever estimate protects Israel better, because of course he's an ally of Israel. So the bias would be to choose the estimate that will produce more, not less, protection for the state of Israel. And that would be the estimate where you say we have to err on the side of caution, because the potential danger to Israel, if you get it wrong, is infinite. So the success of the Iranians in dropping a nuclear bomb on Israel imposes an infinite cost on your ally, right? So you have to err on the side of great caution, because the last thing you want for your ally is an infinite cost. Obviously, that's it's your ally, right? Yeah. So the bias would be to choose the estimate that is most conservative in terms of assuming that Iran is a danger. And that would be the estimate that says, oh, it was only delayed by, maybe a couple of months, right? So if there is some evidence that can be interpreted in that way, then that's where you would go, because you want to be as safe as possible from an infinite cost, right? Of course, that's the last estimate that an enemy of Israel would choose. An enemy of Israel, this is the opposite hypothesis, an enemy of Israel would want to choose the estimate that says there's no danger, or the closest thing to there's no danger now, because and Israel will, and Jews around the world and the friends of the Jews everywhere will lower their guard, right? They'll say, oh, well, maybe, so there's no more danger. We don't have to be as concerned We don't have to be as alarmed, as ready. And that, of course, makes it easier, not harder, for the Iranians to develop then the nuclear weapon in time to drop it on Israel while they're napping, right? So an enemy of Israel prefers the longer estimate, which makes Israel more vulnerable through overconfidence. And the ally of Israel should prefer the shorter estimate, which errs on the side of being cautious in protecting Israel from an infinite cost. What did Trump do? Which estimate did he prefer?
According to the last news, the Pentagon says here, I will share the screen, Francisco,
Yeah.
that, look, this is a resource that we will put in the description afterwards, but what we can see is that the Pentagon says that attacks of USA delayed the nuclear program in Iran by 1 or 2 years.
So he's preferring the absolute longest estimate that anybody has proposed.
Yes. Yes.
Which is exactly, again, what an enemy of Israel would prefer, right? The enemy of Israel has a bias to choose the estimate that produces overconfidence and therefore vulnerability for an infinite cost to the state of Israel. That's what Trump preferred as an estimate of the effect on Iran.
Yes, and we can see also what Rafael Grossi says, who is the director of the International Organism of Atomic Energy. He says that the nuclear weapons of Iran are still there, and they can be rebuilt in a matter of months, he says.
So let's then intensify what this evidence means. Trump has preferred the longest possible estimate, which is the one that hurts Israel the most, even though the international experts are going in the exact opposite direction and choosing the shortest possible estimate. So Trump, in order to choose the estimate that hurts Israel the most, has to defy institutional international expert opinion. Well, he's going out on a limb, isn't he?
Yes, and Parnell, who is a leader of the Pentagon, on Wednesday, he did an announcement, an official announcement, and he declined to respond the comment of Grossi, who said that it can be rebuilt in a few months. So
okay, well, this is all very interesting. All right, so we have at least very strong consistency in Donald Trump's behavior, which is just one more of his behaviors. We've been publishing for months now on this question, and the general direction of Trump's choices has been anti-Israel and pro-jihadi. But here's one more example, right? And it's a dramatic one, right? He's going out of his way. He's going completely out on a limb to disagree with the internationally recognized experts on this question in order to choose the estimate that hurts Israel the most. It's very clear behavior, a very clear behavior. You had another one. Tell me, what was the other one?
Yes, I will show you a very dramatic one also. But what I wanted to add is that a true ally of Israel at least would consider the idea, right? Like to analyze it, not just to decline it completely and not look into it, right? Like at least you would.
But for our English-speaking audience, we have to tell them what this is about. So let me just translate the title.
Yeah.
So it says here, this a news item that says, and I quote, Israel claims that Iran was not able to take out all of the enriched uranium from the bombarded installations, from the installations that the U.S. bombarded. So wait a minute, they weren't able to take it out?
Yeah, Israel is not the country, it's the Minister of Defense, who is called Israel Katz. So this is very maybe a little confusing, but this is a statement that he did in the last days. So yeah.
So he's saying, so the Israeli defense minister, is that who he is?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Israeli defense minister is saying that Israel did destroy all of the enriched uranium. That's what he's saying. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Aha. So, okay. So wait a minute. I really need to point this out, what this means grammatically. The Israeli defense minister, this is the defense minister, people. Okay, pay attention. This is grammatical stuff. The Israeli defense minister is professionally obligated to defend Israel. That's what the title of his job means. That's the semantic content of his title. He is supposed to defend Israel. He is the most important bureaucrat on the question of defending Israel. He's the defense minister. Get it? This man is behaving just like Donald Trump. He is choosing to interpret the evidence in the way that makes Israel most vulnerable. The Israeli defense minister is insisting that all of the enriched uranium was destroyed, which is the worst assumption possible for the Israeli defense minister. At least one who really is defending Israel.
Yes.
Okay? An Israeli defense minister who is really defending Israel would be saying that if there's any evidence, that all of the enriched uranium was not destroyed, then you should assume it was not all destroyed, because that is the assumption that most protects Israel. You have to err on the side of caution to defend Israel. And that's exactly the opposite of what the Israeli defense minister is doing. If this is not diagnostic of who really is running the government in Israel, then nothing is. When the Israeli defense minister chooses to assume precisely what makes Israel vulnerable, then what you know is that the state of Israel is being run by the enemies of Israel. It's a very simple grammatical conclusion.
I also wanted to add, Francisco, that that's how the news start, but then he also says and suggests that Iran could maintain access to the enrichment of uranium in Isfahan.
At least.
And that we need all our resources and all our strength to make an operation in order to guarantee that the Islamic Republic cannot rebuild it. That's
all right. Well, so it's not a complete disaster. A complete disaster, but still, you expect the Minister of Defense of the State of Israel to have a complete argument that is completely biased towards the defense of Israel. I mean, it's incredible that he should have ever said that that the Iranians were not able to get the enriched uranium out, when actually so many experts said exactly the opposite, right? So any evidence that the enriched uranium survived should be invoked by the Minister of Defense of Israel as evidence that there's that the Iranians still have it, because that's where you want to be. That's the bias that you're supposed to have if you're defending Israel. So again, all of the evidence that is coming in has to be processed in this manner. You have two hypotheses. One hypothesis is these people, whether they're people in the US government, people in the Israeli government, people who participate in international politics in some way, philanthropists, whatever. What does the hypothesis of alliance with Israel predict? And what does the hypothesis of enmity with Israel predict? And then pay attention to people's behaviors, because The only thing that matters is how people behave. People can always claim, they can always say, you know, I'm very patriotic, or I'm very pro this or pro that. Those kinds of statements can be made with almost zero cost. They cost people almost nothing to represent themselves in any particular way. So the only way to really interpret the structure of alliances is to pay attention to the costly behaviors. And actually, there's an entire theory about this in evolutionary theory, which is called costly signaling theory. And the entire basis of costly signaling theory is that in the only way to have any confidence that a signal that is being emitted is an honest signal, right, is when the signal is costly, because it means that the creature emitting the signal has the wherewithal and the intention of emitting that signal, you know, because it's paying the cost of emitting the signal. So only when the signal is really costly can you have any confidence that it is meaningful, that it's an honest signal, right? So when people grab the microphone in politics, in Western politics, right? When a politician grabs the microphone to say whatever they say, it doesn't matter what it is, you should pay no attention to it, because there is no cost for cheap talk. It's cheap we call it cheap talk for a reason, right? There's no cost. But when they spend billions of dollars, right? When they spend billions of dollars getting something done, pay attention to that. And if what they got done, spending billions, what they said that they meant to do, then pay attention to what they got done, not to what they said they meant to do. Right? So, and this is what we're doing here, because these behaviors are behaviors with policy consequences, right? When Donald Trump says, I choose the estimate, you know, that we delayed Iran's nuclear program by 2 years, which is absolutely the worst estimate for Israel, right? That's a policy consequence. That's an estimate that goes into Pentagon planning and diplomatic initiative and blah, blah, blah. It begins to affect policy. It's not just an opinion, right? So that's a costly behavior. That's a costly signal. And that is worth a lot more in terms of your ability to interpret the system than any kind of bromide or homily that Trump could make, where he, you know, sanctimoniously claims to be very pro-Israel. That's worthless, really. So this is how we have to. This is the kind of, if you will, analytical ability that we need to learn to apply when we're considering the evidence, because of course everything that happens comes always packaged with a lot of manipulation, right? The way the media talks to us, the way politicians talk to us, it's covered and drenched in manipulation. So the only way to emancipate yourself from that is to really pay attention to the costly behaviors, because those are in themselves signals. They're honest signals.
Francisco, that reminds me of a phrase, a very famous phrase, maybe you heard of it, which is the following, that says, can a liar tell the truth? Can a narcissist?
Can a liar, what?
Could a liar tell the truth? Can a narcissist say I love you? So couldn't a dictator say freedom?
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course. Very good point. Yeah. Hypocrisy is everywhere. Why would you assume it? The one place where it doesn't exist is politics. That's crazy. Yeah. Obviously, it's worse there. So you shouldn't ever pay attention to what those people say. Just look at what they do. It's the only way to build a model of the world. Of course, all of the people running countries are going to say that they're patriots. What else are they going to say? It would be suicidal to say anything else. So when they say they're patriots, they're communication means it communicates nothing. It has zero value. You should not use it to interpret anything. Just pay attention to what they do. And especially the things that they really pay a lot of money to get done. That's where their true heart really is. And of course, all of this is obvious, but we have to say it. We have to say it over and over again. Why? Because the entire academic and media envelope in which we exist is constantly conditioning people to interpret the world on the basis of what politicians say. This is always going on. So they'll tell you that the US, for example, is an enemy, that the US government is an enemy of the Ayatollahs on the basis of the public statements of the people running the US and the people running Iran. Well, what are we in kindergarten? As if these people couldn't possibly be misrepresenting themselves if that were advantageous? It's ridiculous. Obviously, the public representations that these people make should never be considered at all in the process of building a scientific model of the geopolitical world. Obviously. And yet, this is exactly what the academic and media world do, which is in itself a demonstration of the system of control, because a true scientific free press and a true scientific academic social science environment would never proceed in this manner. It's laughable. It's simply laughable. So the way they are always nudging us to interpret the world on the basis of the public representations of the politicians and the bureaucrats, what an amazing thing. The fact that they do this is in itself a demonstration of the controlled aspect of the meaning system. But this is what we explain in the management of reality. That's why we call ourselves the management of reality, because this is what we're explaining. We're explaining how the false reality is constructed through the control of all of the meaning-making structures, and it is so complete that it is very, very difficult to see. It's a little bit like, or a lot like, living in the Truman Show, and we have an article about that too on the website. We compare the experience of Truman Burbank, which is of course extreme, right? But our experience is also extreme,
yes,
in a different way.
Like the show of the attempts against Trump, or all the shows that they do is very extreme, I would say. Yeah.
So anyway, I think that might be a good segue. I think we managed to produce a kind of segue into the second topic that we were going to discuss today.
Yes.
Which is,
before that, Francisco, there's a question here that if you think that it's relevant, you could answer it. From Shalom Ahava, it says, "Hi Francisco, I don't know if it is of the subject, but maybe you can tell us about Trump and the Epstein files." If you want to add that.
Okay, so I'm not an expert on this topic, but I can say what I know about it and why it's relevant. So I can say a little bit about this, but not much. So here's what I know. Donald Trump is on the list of people who traveled with Jeffrey Epstein to his private island, which in itself, of course, doesn't prove anything concerning any kind of abuse of minors by Donald Trump or anything like that, obviously. It just means that he flew to the island on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. But of course, it does raise questions of that kind in many people's minds. And there is something interesting about the Epstein file, or the Epstein files, or there's a bunch of documentation about Jeffrey Epstein that was supposed to be released after Donald Trump became president, because Donald Trump presented himself as an enemy of the deep state. And of course, it is very obvious that Jeffrey Epstein was an agent of that deep state. His whole pedophile ring operation it looks exactly like a honeypot. A honeypot is this term that they use in intelligence circles, where you create some kind of criminal, super embarrassing, scandalous situation for the people you want to recruit, that you then want to control through blackmail, right? For example, sex with a minor, right? And so you create that structure, and once you film them or whatever committing this crime, then they're yours, right? And in this way, you can build a system of corruption to take control of various institutions through blackmail, etc. Right? So a lot of people have commented that the Jeffrey Epstein operation obviously had all of the hallmarks of a CIA honeypot operation, and this has been commented about. I mean, it's not even fringe, right? This is discussed everywhere. So because Donald Trump represented himself as an enemy of that kind of stuff, of the deep state, right? That is supposedly, that is accused by people like Donald Trump and the people who supported him, right? The deep state is accused of governing behind the scenes through corruption, outside of the democratic system, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, a true enemy of all of that, if he got into the White House, would be expected to clean it up. And this is what Donald Trump supporters were waiting for. And so how do you assess whether Donald Trump is keeping his promise or not? Well, the Epstein files would be, I think, a really important piece of evidence, because it doesn't get more deep state than a honeypot to produce a system of corruption to take over the institutions of democracy. It doesn't get more deep state than that. So if you are really an enemy of the deep state, the first thing you're going to do is release the Epstein files and have a government inquiry into the behavior of the CIA and how the CIA has been corrupting the institutions of democracy. Why? Because you're an enemy of the deep state. That's what you would do,
yes,
right? But they have not released the Epstein files, and they won't. And a lot of people in the MAGA camp, a lot of the people who worked very hard to get Donald Trump elected, because they wanted to see somebody really work to dismantle the deep state, they're very disappointed and upset. And, obviously, none of that is going to get released. There's been no even half-hearted attempt to do anything about the CIA. But the only thing they did was they closed down a few USAID programs that were obviously very bad, but they're just the tip of the iceberg, and they'll have other programs up and running immediately. This is all just simulation. It's what they call a limited hangout. And, I've mentioned how the limited hangouts work. This is a term from intelligence circles. What it means is that the scandal is coming, or it's already upon you, and you need to do some damage control because they caught you doing illegal stuff in secret. That obviously undermines democracy and human rights and so forth. So you got caught, and now the way you control the damage is you pretend to investigate yourself, right? So the government pretends to have an investigation and to discover the crimes, and so this gets exposed, and the whole process lulls people to sleep. They get the impression that things are getting cleaned up, which is exactly what a lot of people thought was happening with the whole USAID business. But it's only the tip of the iceberg. Nobody goes to jail. Have you noticed that nobody went to jail for any of that? And this always happens. Every time they have a limited hangout, nobody goes to jail. The incredible crimes are committed. The deep state violates all the basic laws of the Constitution. Nobody goes to jail. Iran-Contra, nobody did jail time except, but I think Oliver North may have done I don't know, a few months in jail. That was it. Nobody else went to jail, right? This is what they do. It's a limited hangout, right? And everything that Donald Trump is doing, everything that his administration is doing, is perfectly consistent with a limited hangout. So the few things that seem like he is keeping his promises are precisely what you would expect in a limited hangout. They are all things that don't really endanger the CIA's infrastructure of blackmail and bribes and other kinds of corruption that they use to take clandestine control of the system. And if Donald Trump really were an enemy of the deep state, he would go after U.S. intelligence first. You can't clean any of this up unless you go through. And let me tell you something. Let me say this here on the record, because you never know what's going to happen. And I think it's important that it should be said out loud somewhere. And I have said it in a couple of other places. The only way there can be a democratic future for the West, the only way, is if we reform our constitutions to make it illegal, constitutionally illegal, to create a clandestine service that can spend the money of the citizens in secret. That has to be impossible. And we've explained in the website, we have an article about Maurice Joly, who was the first to explain this way back in the second half of the 19th century. Maurice Joly explained, look, if the citizens allow the quote unquote democratic government to create a clandestine service that spends citizen monies in secret, you have to understand the money controlled by the treasury of any government is a fantastic amount of money. If the bureaucrats can spend that in secret, they can corrupt anything. And this is what Maurice Joly was explaining. He was, the minute you allow them that, you've destroyed your democracy, because the temptation to use that secret money to augment their power is impossible to resist. It's an open bribe. It's like the citizens are bribing them to become corrupt.
Yes.
You know, you left the what would be the metaphor? You left the money on the table for the kleptomaniac. You sat him on the table full of money, and then you left. Well, of course he's going to take the money. He's a kleptomaniac. Right? People who are in the business of power are addicted to power. If you allow those people to spend the biggest pile of money in existence in secret, obviously they're going to spend it to increase their power. I mean, it's 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't take a genius to understand it once you say it. But the entire educational system is designed so that we will never think this. What they do instead is that they teach us, and they do it especially strongly in the most elite universities. They teach us to say that conspiracy theory is automatically absurd. Not that some conspiracy theories might be reasonable and others might be absurd, depending on what the evidence is. No. Any conspiracy theory is, in other words, any Machiavellian hypothesis that says that the people in power are working in secret to undermine our own rights, right? Any hypothesis with that structure is supposed to be automatically absurd. Well, I mean, if you buy that, then you've already become a mental slave. It means that you don't allow yourself even to put on the table a hypothesis about what the people with the most power might be doing with the constitutional permission that we gave them to spend our money in secret. Is that reasonable? No, to the contrary. You cannot do political science or international relations theory without doing conspiracy theory. The minute you outlaw conspiracy theory, you've become a pseudoscience. Because what you've said is that the most relevant and important category of theory, which would be obviously the first kind of theory you would always have to do if your bias is to protect democracy, right? Which is conspiracy theory. That's the very kind of theory that you're not allowed to do, because then you're stupid, you're ridiculous, you're paranoid, you're an extremist, you're fringe. add any adjective that you want. And of course, anybody who tries to do a PhD thesis with that structure, with a structure that is skeptical of Machiavellian power, right? They won't let you write the thesis. They won't let you do it. They consider it almost immoral. See, and that again is itself evidence of a system of control. It's a system of control. It's not, if you will, transparent, right? It doesn't announce itself as a system of control. Nobody says explicitly, you can't do conspiracy theory because we are actually living in a totalitarian system that wants to look like a democracy. They don't say it like that. What they say is, no, conspiracy theories are crazy and conspiracy theorists are, rednecks and blah, blah, blah. And they give you this little cultural story that will convince you, because you have an identity as an intelligent person who was trained in the university, and your intelligence is in fact a consequence of your university training, right? So what they do is they tie your identity as a university trained intelligent person, they tie that identity to the denial of conspiracy theory, to the automatic knee-jerk moralistic denial of conspiracy theory. So it is by denying conspiracy theory that I signal to other members of my polite society that I am a member in good standing of the university-trained intelligent, managers of Western society. This is how the identity works. And once they've worked that identity into your head, what you do is that you censor yourself. Anytime you become suspicious of power, you will get scared that you are becoming the kind of person that other members of your polite society automatically shun. So in order to avoid that ostracism, your own psychology works very hard to reconvince you of the fake reality that is being managed all around you, so that you can stay in your polite society circle of university-trained intelligent managers of the West. And it is through this identity that the system protects itself from the very kinds of people that could pose the greatest danger, which are the university-trained professionals who have the institutional position and the chops to investigate the system and lay it bare. So those are the people that you want to be most asleep. And this is how they do it. They do it through the construction of their very identity, their narcissistic, self-important identity as university-trained, intelligent people. Wow. It's very clever. And it deserves our admiration. It deserves our admiration from the let us say, from the scientific point of view, because it is a truly sophisticated and well put together cultural system, right? It's a system of values and signaling and social positioning and bureaucratic articulation, right? All of the elements are there that reproduces itself. It reproduces itself with great success and holds the structure together so that it cannot be reformed. But of course, it has weaknesses. And right now, the main weakness of the system is this new technology, these new technologies of communication that we are making use of right now, because they allow Western citizens to communicate with each other and to share these videos virally before the system can figure out how to censor information again. They're trying to do it. We've seen them. They're doing it all the time. They're trying to figure out new ways to, but it leaks. It leaks, all over the place. So we are at a moment right now of great opportunity, and we should seize it.
Excellent. So this could be related to the next topic, right, Francisco?
All right, so we had another segue. We have another possible segue. Let's see if it works.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's about the history of the West, right? To understand a little bit more about the roots, how we got these values from the West, right? That's the next topic, which is really important because, as you said in a previous live, not many people know about history. We are just in we are born and we just see a little bit about the past, a little bit about the future, and we are not very interested in, or we cannot even.
Well, I think we might be interested if the education of history had any contact with reality. So if our history teachers would actually tell us what really happened, I think kids would be fascinated, because the true history of Western Asia, which is a geographical area that includes Europe and the Mediterranean, is fascinating. And in that giant piece of land, for 4,300 years, it has been like one large system where Semitism and anti-Semitism have been duking it out. So I think that, and really, it's good versus evil. I mean, it's exactly like that. It's a system that is trying to pursue the values of ethics, right? Of love your brother as you love yourself, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Which is the what Rabbi Hillel the Elder established as the basis of all rabbinical Judaism, right? So that's one side. That's Semitism. The Jews are a product of Semitism, right? And on the other side, you have anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism is the defense of all the opposite values, right? It's war, cruelty, oppression, slavery, totalitarianism, and so forth. So if so it becomes like Tolkien, right? This is like you have the good guys, the pure good. So there are shades of gray, and you get those in Tolkien too, right? So you get the hobbits, who are just the nicest. I mean, you criticizing a hobbit is just almost, why are you doing that? I mean, come on. I mean, they're already all of them so close to being saints. Any criticism you would make about any individual hobbit just seems like you're just an impossible person, right? That's the hobbits. Then you have the elves. The elves are mostly good, but when they're bad, they're super bad because they're very powerful. Blah blah blah. And then you have the humans, who are not quite as powerful, but also the average, human is not so good. They're controversial. They can be very good, but they can also be bad. They can go either way. It's a big problem. So you have this kind of variation. And you see this kind of variation in the history of Western Asia. You have societies that are very, very focused on, as a central, what would you call it? A central aspiration of their civilization, to try to figure out institutionally how to make the world better, right? And that's Babylonian Semitism, right? Which begins with Sargon of Akkad 4,300 years ago, and it's a long. It lasted 2,000 years in Mesopotamia, and then the Jews came out of that and brought it to the West, right? Trying to make the world better. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then on the other side, you have these systems that are just they're literally like Mordor. They're just how many people we can kill and enslave, and how can we step on them more cruelly, and turn them into dust, just grind them down. And they're not, it's not simply functional, it's sadistic. So think about the Romans. I always give this example because it's so vivid. They thought it was like going to the movies to watch two people fight to the death, or to watch a lion destroy a live human being. Okay? Well, obviously, this is psychopathic. This is the opposite. This is the search for everything that is against ethics. The Romans were like that. But our educational system teaches us to admire the Romans and the Greeks, who were a lot like the Romans, right? Very similar systems. politically, and our entire education system makes it obligatory, because you have to celebrate the Greeks and Romans to get an A. So it's obligatory. It's obligatory. But so what we're going to publish very soon in the Substack is the new article in the series on Semitism and anti-Semitism, where we contrast what was going on in the first century before Jesus, because to compare the two things going on in the Jewish world and in the Roman world, right, makes it perfectly clear who's who, like who's on which side, who is good and who is evil. It's very, very clear. Why? Because in the first century before Jesus, what the Romans called games was already all the rage all over Italy. Okay, so all the Roman cities were building these wooden structures so that people could, quote unquote, go to the movies to see live human beings being slaves, being forced to fight each other to the death. Okay, this had become entertainment for the Romans in the first century before Jesus. It was happening all over the place. And where were they getting these slaves from? They were getting them from the cities and towns that they conquered in predatory wars that were wars of extermination, because the practice of the Romans when they conquered a foreign city, the normative practice of the Romans, in other words, what was normal, was for the Roman, and what was considered correct, both things, was for the Romans to kill every male citizen, every adult male citizen. Well, only the adults were citizens, so every male citizen, and only males were citizens. That is also true. So they would kill them all. They would exterminate the citizens. They would exterminate them, and they would take the women and children back to Rome to become slaves. Okay, this was normal, and in the process of the battle and the aftermath of the battle, they would mutilate the bodies of the people they had killed, like for fun. They would have fun with the bodies, and even the bodies of the animals.
Wow.
This is based on descriptions that were made by witnesses in the ancient world about how the Romans conducted warfare. Okay, so the entire picture is psychopathic. So that's the Romans in the first century before Jesus. What was happening in the Jewish world at the same time? Well, it's important to mention that in the first century before Jesus, the Romans conquered the Jews. The Romans conquered Jerusalem in the year 63 before Jesus. Okay, and Rabbi Hillel the Elder, the most influential rabbi in the entire history of rabbinical Judaism, he traveled from Babylon to Jerusalem shortly before the Roman conquest of Jerusalem. Okay, and what he preached during the remaining time that of the first century before Jesus was this message that you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself is the fundamental grammatical generative commandment for all of Jewish ethical and legal thought. Okay? So on the one hand, and the rabbis in the next centuries, they turned Rabbi Hillel's legal decisions and his philosophy, they turned all that into the platform for rabbinic jurisprudence going forward. Okay, so this is what's going on in Judaism. Judaism in the first century before Jesus is insisting that the way to produce a better world is for everybody to understand that there is one commandment against which you have to judge everything you do. And that commandment is, you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. You will treat your neighbor as your own flesh. At the same time, the Romans are turning other human beings into their playthings. Destroying human beings,
Wow.
fun. Okay? So there is no clearer contrast possible. Who is good and who is evil? It's not even a question. Right? This is what is going on in the first century before Jesus. People know nothing about this. Nobody learns in school to think about the Roman Empire and the ancient Jews in this way. But once you, and all of this is public information, it's just that nobody puts it together. Now, once you put it together, it is obvious that the Jews were a political problem for the Roman Empire. Okay? Obvious.
Yeah.
Obvious. And in the next article that we are going to publish, we're going to explain that in fact there is plenty of evidence about the first century before Jesus in Rome to support the hypothesis that the revolution, because there was an attempted revolution in the city of Rome in the first, there was a double attempt at revolution. And it was a very radical movement that recruited members of the aristocracy who wanted to change the Roman system. It recruited many Roman citizens, many Roman citizens, and even free laborers and slaves, all together in the same movement. Okay, and there were two attempts to defeat the Roman aristocracy and change the system. And these are very well documented, and people have commented on them a lot. But what Western historians do when they talk about these events is they discuss them in very negative terms, as if these attempted revolutions had been bad things, because they are taking the perspective of the Roman aristocrats who wrote about them and who were the victors. Because remember, it is always the victors who write history. And so these Roman aristocrats who defeated the attempts at revolution and who then established the Roman Empire, their voices are the voices that our own historians transmit when they tell us that the people leading these revolutions were bad guys who were, making trouble, blah blah blah. That's the aristocratic voice of the oppressors. Okay. And when you look at the evidence that we have about these attempts at revolution, you can see that these were people who were suffering, who were trying to transform the Roman system from the nightmare it was into something less violent and less cruel. That's what they were trying to do. And there are many evidences that suggest that the Roman aristocrats, the enlightened Roman aristocrats who were leading this movement, were converts to Judaism. There is very strong evidence to suggest that. And so and it makes perfect sense in context, because something else that has been documented about this period is that many thousands of pagans, that is to say non-Jews, were converting to Judaism during this time. And even larger numbers of non-Jews were becoming what the Jews called God-fearers, which is to say people who adopted practices of the Jews and some of the laws of the Jews and so forth. Like some people started, keeping the Sabbath and adopting some dietary laws and maybe ethical laws and so forth. But they didn't take the plunge into Judaism completely, right? So there's a huge population of Jews, Jewish converts, and then this even larger category of Judaizing God-fearers. And this was such a tremendous phenomenon. It was capturing even people from among the Roman citizenry. There were Roman citizens, and including aristocrats. We know this because the Roman aristocratic military system conducted purges to try to find the aristocrats that were converting to Judaism. We have evidence of that too. So obviously, it makes perfect sense in this general context that the people who led a revolution that even included the slaves of Rome must have been influenced by, or perhaps even converts to, Judaism, the religion that was founded on the memory of a slave revolt, and which has a body of law to all the vulnerable people. It makes perfect sense that all of these people who were either already converting to Judaism or thinking about it in Rome and elsewhere in the Roman Empire would have attempted to overthrow the Roman power and replace it with Jewish law. That makes perfect sense. And so what we're going to do in this article is we're going to present the evidence for how the Romans talked about these attempted revolutions, and piece together this picture that I think it's a very eloquent picture that the evidence paints of an attempted Jewish revolution, doubly attempted revolution in the city of Rome in the 1st century before Jesus. And once you understand that context, now you can begin to understand the time of Jesus. Without it, how could you possibly have any clue what was going on in the time of Jesus? You want to understand the 1st century, then you need to understand the 1st century before Jesus, obviously, because one thing to the next. Time goes in one direction, right? So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to publish that, and then later we will have more things to say about the time of Jesus. All of it very interesting, I promise.
Okay, Francisco, so what you're saying is that Jesus was a repercussion of the 1st century before Jesus. It was like a way to maintain the control of the aristocrats.
No, I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying what I'm going to say. All I'm saying is that once you understand the context of the 1st century, you can begin to build a model of what happened in the 1st century. Once you understand the 1st century before Jesus, you can begin to see how to think about functionally and causally about the evidence we have from the 1st century of the current era. That's what I'm saying. And I don't want to give you a preview of what I'm going to say. I'm just saying, once you understand that there was a revolutionary tension, and that the Jews were strong enough to try to flip the Roman Empire, then once you understand that, then you can begin to understand the evidence we have from the 1st century of the current era. That's all. But the dog barking is the signal that we have to finish our live, because it's already been an hour. So I thank everybody for joining us, and remember, subscribe, share, like us, and ding the bell, because that all helps us get bigger and reach more people.
Yeah, and also we have the course which delves into much more about what Francisco just taught us. So yeah, you're invited to management.
But that one is in Spanish. We don't have the course in English yet. But if you go to franciscogilwhite.com, you will see it'll take you to the Substack, which is in English. Our articles are in English, and there's a lot of material for you there. And we have documentaries and stuff on our YouTube channel. So go check, and interviews. Go check those out. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are in touch.
See you soon, Joel.